Good. So let me tell you a little bit about the course. The course itself is a lesson in entrepreneurship, and it's worth reciting a little bit. Back in the pre-internet days, I was doing some classes at MIT around starting companies and things, and a couple of students came and said, you know, you're very practical, you have some real practical advice. Would you do something during IAP on how to start a company? And I said, oh, well, maybe let me think about it. And I really didn't have much time to do it. And the IAP catalog got published. It was actually a paper document. And in there was a class that I was supposed to teach that I never agreed to teach. And it had nights and specific things. And first of all, I got kind of angry. I said, oh, well, who do they think they are? And then I realized I had a customer. I had people that wanted to hear what they thought I was selling. And I thought, that might be worth doing. And the first thing you need is a customer. And then the problem was I didn't have a lot of time to do it. So, you know, if I'd had more time, I would have screwed it up. I think it was 4 nights. And I said, well, they said it was 3 hours, so let me think, what are the 8 topics? Because I can't expect you to sit still for 3 hours at a time. And I came up with 8 topics that you ought to know about. And then I said, well, it's going to be kind of boring if I'm talking the whole time, so and it's a lot of work. So let me go get some people. And so I got my phone out and I started calling people that I knew and said, would you come and talk about this? And I'd seen them present before, so that was important. And I said, I don't want you to spend a lot of time, you know, putting together, you know, a big presentation. Just 10 minutes, 3, 4, 5 things that you wish somebody had told you about the thing you're going to talk about before you started a company, and then we'll have questions and answers. Well, with that, I got about 4 of the 8 speakers. And for the rest, I called people and I'd say, Bob, do you know anyone who could do this? And you've got to actually have seen the person. And, oh, yeah, I'll get so-and-so. So half the people that showed up I never met before. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And so off we went. And it turned out to be wonderful, because what I had done is I had customers. I had defined a task very clearly to them. I had gotten really good people, and I sort of got out of the way. And after that one, it was like, wow, that worked. We should try it again. So over the years, we've had about probably close to 6,000 people have taken the course. Probably, was it 4 or 5 years in, Yost came and said, you know, could we get some academic credit for this? And I said, I don't know how to do that. And so he took it on himself, and we expanded it to 6 nights, and it meshed very well with the 100K. So this is a product of basically an entrepreneurial effort, and we try to keep it that way. Now, over the years, we've had all sorts of people come through here. We've had teams formed. A number of 100K winners have come out of this course. And there have been a number of companies that went on to actually succeed in the real world. So the fact is, you can do it. In the second year of the course, third year, sorry, I invited back someone who had taken the course in the first year. And I said, just come back and talk about the company you set up. And it was the most remarkable thing. He came in and he started walking up the aisle, counted out about 10 rows, counted in 6 seats, and there was someone sitting there, and he said, get out of my seat. The student goes, what? Get out of my seat. You're sitting in my seat. And the student goes, I was here first, and you're the speaker, aren't you? He said, no, I was in that seat 3 years ago, and I listened to this course, and I said, you know, it doesn't seem that hard. I think I can go out and do it, and you can do it too. I'm going to tell you what I did right and what I did wrong. And I thought, that was unrehearsed. That was really amazing. So the point is, you can really do it. Don't, you know, entrepreneurship is like a contact sport. You got to get in and do it. It's not an intellectual exercise. So that's, we've been doing it for 30 years. This is the 30th year of the course. I graduated MIT when I was 5 years old, so that works out about right. And through all of the things, in looking at what we've done over the years, through booms and busts, you know, we were here when the internet crashed, when the real estate market crashed. It sort of came down to 2 things that we're going to hammer home over and over again during the course. The themes are, first thing, you have to create value for somebody, something somebody values. If you don't do that, you don't have anything, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit. And the questions we'll come back to is, what does that mean to create value? And the second part is, you've got to capture some of that value so you can do it again. And we'll hammer this home over and over again. Those are the two themes in the course. So with that, I'm going to go through tonight's plan. First of all, I'm going to talk about who you are, give you a little feedback since you don't know each other. And then we're going to introduce the teaching team and our case study that we have. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about venture planning basics. We'll have a break for some team building, and Bob Jones will be back telling you about these strange creatures called customers. So all of you presumably signed up at the email registration site, and I want to give you an idea of who was here so you can see what a range we have. First of all, from an organization viewpoint, we have people from Harvard, BU, Wellesley College, Partners Healthcare, Price Waterhouse, edX, University of Michigan, Arizona, RMIT University, which is in Australia, Broad Institute, Novartis, Draper, Skoltech in Russia, Birzeit, is that how you pronounce it? University in Palestine, Cornell, Mass Challenge, Johns Hopkins, Notre Dame, Northeastern, Hull International Business, University of Strathclyde in Scotland, universities in Spain and Chile, Babson, Harvard Medical School, HubSpot, McKinsey, Roxbury Innovation Center, Harvard Business School, Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, Mass General, MITRE Corporation, Schlumberger, several private companies, and of course, people from MIT, from all sorts of parts, engineering, science, et cetera. Let's get a feeling on where you are. Who's from Sloan School? Hands up. Okay, and who's from engineering? Okay, I see the Sloan people cluster together. We'll have to change that. How about science? Okay, and architecture planning? Okay, and humanities? Did we hit every school? I'll declare we did. Okay, so at the break, we're going to ask the Sloan people who seem to cluster together in a clan to go and sit with somebody who's not a Sloan person, okay? And get to talking about, why you're here, et cetera. Now, other than organizations, first of all, who has an idea and is looking for team members? Just general? Okay, we got some, they're doing this, because this is almost like you say, who's got money and wants to invest, and it's sort of, they used to wear, at these gatherings, they used to have name tags with little colors on it, and if you had a green one, it meant you had money. You never wanted to have a green one, because you didn't. So among the people that have an idea, and among the interests expressed in the sign-up, we have people in neuroscience, AI, machine learning, mental health, clean tech, biomedical, computer vision, applied psychologies. There's a cosmetic startup, a cannabis manufacturing startup, no samples allowed, environmental sustainability, battery design, solar ed tech, a SaaS startup, corporate entrepreneurship and innovation. I think that it's this is right in my wheelhouse, because right now I've got a small company that I'm actively involved with. We're dealing with a big corporate giant, and the culture clashes between them. Not clashes, but the impedance between it is quite interesting. So I can throw something on that. We have a travel industry startup, esports, agriculture, microbiome, blockchain, real estate and construction, social ventures, including poverty, homelessness, criminal justice, and foster care, hardware-focused engineering courses relevant to high school girls, housing, augmented reality, 3D bioprinting, wearable devices. So quite a range. Specific skills that people said you wanted to learn during the course. Someone wanted to learn agile drug R&D. I'm not sure we're going to be able to cover that. If someone even knows that, maybe we can volunteer. One person said how to convert an idea into reality. We'll try to see if we can do that with you. How to test the viability of an idea. Absolutely. How to share the idea while ensuring it's not stolen. We'll cover that on the legal night. How to form the right team. We'll have something on that. These are the right kind of questions to ask. Somebody said key issues entrepreneurs meet in their day-to-day endeavors. We'll get some of that out. And how to negotiate a term sheet with VCs. We won't cover that exactly, but we'll introduce you to the concepts of VC financing and what some of the issues are. So that's where you're from, what your ideas are, what skills you're interested in, and then what previous experience have you in entrepreneurship? We have a 4-time founder of energy startups. We have an ousted founder of a company. That'll be an interesting one if we can get him or her to come forward. First course ever taken, several other MIT entrepreneurship courses. Second year of a startup. Took nuts and bolts 10 years ago. Several startups, always been in government. I think we have a venture mentoring service member. And of course, among students and faculty, we have everything from undergraduates to actually faculty members. So as you can see, that's quite a range. And the question is, how are we going to meet all of that expectation? So since it's MIT, we have to start with a formula. That's how we're going to do it. So anyone want to tell me what the formula means? It's actually a universal principle. I'll give you a hint. H is happiness.
I think it's happiness equals like returns over expectation.
Well, that's close. See, normally the Sloan people will say it's revenue divided by expenses or something like that. Okay, that's a subset of that, but you're close, close.
Reality over expectations?
Yeah, reality divided by expectations. So given all of the things you hope to get out of this course, it's very easy. I can satisfy you infinitely if you just get rid of all those expectations, right? E equals 0 and we're infinite. This is a universal principle. It applies to dealing with customers, under promise, over deliver, with investors, with the people you're going to hire. And setting expectations appropriately will make a real difference, because if you go to Wall Street and someone expected to make $2 million and they made $1,999,000, they're unhappy. And of course, by any standard, that's a lot of money. So remember this in the endeavors you go forward. So reduce your expectations, because I can't control reality too much here. Are we all set with that formula? Okay. What else we got? Okay, so who are we? Do a quick introduction. The bios are on the website. I've done a lot of companies over the years, from being a founder of one to advising to investing and being a director. I was a founding judge of the 100K, which was hard to believe the 100K didn't exist one day. I've done things with the Enterprise Forum. I've got a couple of companies that I'm running right now. And I'm here with credentials because I've screwed up enough that I can stand here and tell you about it. We have Joost Bonson. Joost, do you want to?
Yeah, hi everybody. I was actually an undergrad entrant in that competition that Joe was the founding judge of, and completely lost. So what I want to do is convey to you lessons learned about what both not to do and what to do. You'll see me again tomorrow night and over the course of these next 2 weeks. My personal interest in all of this is having not only helped run the 100K entrepreneurship competition for a couple of years, but since then, having grown the venture ecosystem to much of what it is today, teaching now half dozen classes jointly across a handful of our MIT schools, plus having spun out educational media venture, having served as a volunteer in a handful of the MIT-related entrepreneurial support organizations. The stuff I particularly care about, what you'll hear more about tomorrow, is the team dynamics, how to identify, recruit, engage the larger landscape of talent that we're in the middle of being at this institution. So all the best in making this work.
That may be the only time you see him in a tuxedo. I'm not quite sure. But Joost, how many, were you 20% or 30% of the first year's competition? He had quite a few of them, but I got to say, I think at least half of the ones you came up with turned into ideas that other people took to market. So you were not an idea lacking person. So that was good. We have 3 TAs. Rihanna, who is not here, she had her flight canceled from San Francisco. She'll be with us for both weeks. And when she comes tomorrow night, I'll have her say something. And let me introduce our other 2 TAs. Harry, you want to?
Yeah.
I just copied your bios. Sure. You can tell what you want.
Hey everyone, my name's Harry Kanan. I am currently co-managing director of the 100K along with Sai and Kat, who's not here. My other entrepreneurship experience, I owned and very poorly ran a custom apparel company in college, and then sold it right in time for it to get run out of business. And I spent a few years at a healthcare startup across the street at the Cambridge Innovation Center. So.
Okay. Hi guys, I'm Sai Schroeder. As Harry mentioned, I'm one of the other managing directors of the 100K competition. I don't have much of an entrepreneurial background, but prior to Swoon, I was working in asset management, spent 3 years in North Carolina and then 1 year in London. But I'm excited to help out with the class and work in 100K. And
these are the guys you want to get to know because they control all the logistics of the course, right? Including you'll tell them about this later in the evening. Okay. Okay, so second part of our agenda is, you want to come in or? Sure, okay. Is introducing our case study. We have a case study that we sort of follow lightly in the background, and the materials are in there, but it's a real case. It's virtual ink. You can tell by that it was and I'll show you a little bit of what their product was. Do not assume, however, when you look at the plan, that it is a model for what you should do. We do get the founder of the company to come in on the last night and tell you the kind of things that you normally don't hear people talk about in public. It's very easy to get someone to come and say, I came up with an idea in my dorm room, and it was, we went public 2 weeks later. But to have someone come in and tell you about something that was real, that raised a bunch of money, and how it, and lessons to be learned from that, that's a rare thing. And so when Ronald gets here, we'll see that. Now let me see if I can introduce the product backwards here. Let's take this back, sorry. This is the current version of what the product was.
Unlike conventional interactive whiteboards, the small and portable MimioTeach interactive system transforms any ordinary whiteboard into a state-of-the-art teaching tool. Quickly and easily, the system includes the wireless MimioTeach bar and rechargeable stylus. It's so easy to set up, it'll be ready in just a few minutes. Simply place the MimioTeach bar onto your classroom whiteboard. Plug in the Mimio Hub wireless receiver and launch the Mimio Studio software. Push the calibration button on the bar and the software will lead you through the process. That's it, the system is ready. Now you can start teaching with interactive lessons, websites, audio, video, and so much more. The MimioTeach interactive system. Bringing interactive teaching to your students? Simple.
Okay, that is a quick overview of, if I can move this out of the way and come back here. A quick overview of the product that came out of Ronald's idea. This was, I believe, his 3rd attempt at the business plan competition, if I'm right, Yost. And he'll come back and tell us about it on the last night of the course. Now,
Joe, not only 3rd attempt, but on this 3rd attempt, he successfully made it to being one of the runner-up winners in what was then's version of the 100K. So it was not only something that started as a dorm room venture,
right,
but did well in early monies, and had this glorious arc of greatness and trauma, which we'll hear on the final night.
Right.
Highly, highly recommended, and that's why it's a live case.
well, and it's also because, as you see the product, you can almost, it's not hard to understand sort of the concepts behind it. I mean, there's a lot of technology, but it's not so esoteric that you can't put yourself in the place of Ronald with an idea as he'll explain, that he was sitting in class trying to take notes all the time and thought, this is like a total waste of time. I think it was actually when he was a TA that he thought about it. So you can picture he had this idea, and then he, how did he take it from there to the full story of Virtual Link is sort of the story of how you do a startup and what can go on. Here is Yonald, the full plan is in the course reader. For those of you have access to MIT Learning modules, we'll talk a little bit about logistics if you're having problems at the break. You can get the full plan. Again, it's not a model plan, but it is a real plan. That's the other thing. You usually don't get people to give you a copy of their actual plan. That's very hard to do and to allow it to go out there. So we'll touch it during parts of it. So with that, we're going to move into a part where I'm going to talk a little bit about venture planning basics to set a foundation for the other topics during the rest of the course, things that we'll come back to, and then we'll go from there. As with all this stuff, especially when I do it, MIT, we have this concept of being an MIT is like trying to drink from a fire hose. I'm going to throw a lot of stuff out there. It's impossible for you to digest it all at one time. And so try to get the concepts. The slides will be available on the website, nutsandbolts.mit.edu, after class. So don't worry about trying to take too many notes. I'm going to talk about why even do this and what should be in it, and then talk about using a plan or a pitch deck as a financing document. So going way back, this is Life magazine. Does it still exist? I don't think so. It was a popular one. And the picture is of Dwight Eisenhower, who was the commander in World War II with D-Day, that was one of the major military events of all time. And he became president of the United States. And he said, plans are worthless. Here's a guy who planned the D-Day invasion. But planning is everything. And that's what it's really about, we're going to be talking about. The plan, the document, the first thing you're going to know is when you actually take it into battle, so to speak, it's going to change. But it's a discipline of going through a process of planning of what you're doing, of having planning contingencies that makes a difference. On a more practical basis, you need a plan or something you can hand to people for a variety of reasons, including financing. People are going to want to see something, be it a plan or a pitch deck. Same thing with strategic partners, and basically explaining your venture to anybody, customers, suppliers, if they're, how do you get someone to supply you goods when you don't have any money and they've never heard of you before? Bob will have something to say about that, I think, later, if I know him right. And to attract key people. You can't do it alone, and again, why would somebody come and work for you if, unless you had a really good plan of what you were going to do that you could pitch to them. But the more important thing is, as part of that, is you really need to understand what you're doing, what your business or your venture is. It's the plan itself, the result is a planning process, and although it's a little trite, people don't plan to fail, they just fail to plan. I mean, it's sort of trite, but it's true. If you don't think ahead about things, you're going to have a problem. You need to understand who are your customers, why will they buy what you're offering, and what will they pay, or how will you capture value from them if they're not paying customers. Our healthcare system is one in which, at least today, the person who gets the service doesn't directly pay for it other than the deductibles. And how will you make and deliver it, and what resources are you going to need in order to make it all happen? You have to think about all those. If you're going to ask people for money to back it, they're going to want to know, well, what are you going to do with my money, and is it a reasonable thing? And same thing, if I come to join you, how do I know you're going to be here or have a shot at being here 3 months from now? And it's really simple, coming back to those two themes, no matter whether it's a startup business in any of the technology areas or education or nonprofit, it's can we create value and can we capture some of the value? Now, in the case of a for-profit, the capturing of the value is eventually profits. If you have something where it's a nonprofit or something, it's how are you going to capture some of the value so it can be sustainable in some way, so you can do it again. Okay, those are the themes. So the concept is simple, but the answers are not. And I have two highly rehearsed actors who are going to tell us a little bit about it. Would you come up with and grab a mic? Okay, and say, which one is Mark?
I am.
Okay. All right, here we go. You ready? This is a scene from The Social Network. You'll have to share the things. Okay, ready? Eduardo, start off.
It's time to monetize the site.
What does that mean?
It means it's time for the website to generate revenue.
No, I know what the word means. I'm asking how you want to do it.
Advertising.
No,
We've got 4,000 members.
because the Facebook is cool. If we start installing pop-ups for Mountain Dew, it's not
I
gonna.
wasn't thinking Mountain Dew, but at some point, and I'm talking as the business end of the company, the site.
We don't even know what it is yet. We don't know what it is. We don't know what it can be. We don't know what it will be. We know that it's cool. That is a priceless asset, and I'm not giving it up.
When will it be finished?
It won't be finished. That's the point. The way fashion's never finished.
Okay, let's, do we do it? All right. Now, I sprung this on them like, what, 5 minutes ago or something? And they did say that one was in middle school play and one was in a high school play. I'll let you figure out which is which. Okay. So why do I put that up there? If you take it back to when Facebook was this size, and if this really happened at 4,000 members, you know, how are we going to how are we going to do this? How are we going to make money on it? And it's not just an isolated thing. I went and looked at the annual report for Facebook after it went public. This is the thing you file with the Securities and Exchange Commission. And you're supposed to talk about your business and explain to investors. And here's what it said. Our mission is to make the world more open and connected. And it said, it had three things that they talked about. How do we create value for users? They had a whole section on that. How do we create values for users? How do we create value for developers through the Facebook platform? Realizing I need users and I need developers to come together. And then how do we create value for marketeers? So this is a company that went from 4,000 users to a public company and now is where it is today. It has a whole bunch of other problems today, as you know, with data privacy and everything. But the concept of always thinking about how do I create value and then how do we capture value with it. So something to keep in mind. When I think about the whole venture and how not only do I put it together, but how I communicate it, I think of a pyramid. And at the top of the pyramid is the mission statement or vision statement. Okay? Underneath that is, the elevator pitch. Is everyone familiar with an elevator? What an elevator pitch is and why it's called an elevator pitch? It used to be in the high-rise, all the financing people were in high-rise buildings, and you get in an elevator, and the theory was if you couldn't convey it to somebody in the elevator as they went up to 20 stories, then you weren't going to get an interview. Then what happened was all the venture capitalists moved out to low-rise buildings. The elevators were slower, so you had to be quicker because there were only a few floors. The point is, can you convey your idea? And then can you take that idea that you conveyed and someone says, well, come on in and send me something on that in an executive summary. And then maybe you get asked to come in and make a pitch or make a presentation. I'm talking about financing here, but it applies to any of the resources you need to bring. A customer, financing type thing, or employees or consultants. Then there's a full plan, and underneath that, there's a lot of detail that you've thought about. But the trick is, can you convey that all up to the tip of the pyramid? So this should be, the mission statement is like a sentence or a paragraph. The pitch is 30 seconds, or however long the elevator is. You should probably have two pitches, one for the slow elevator, one for the fast one. The executive summary, maybe 2 to 5 pages. The pitch deck, a famous guy, Kawasaki, 10, 20, 30, 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30-point font. The full plan, maybe if you write it, 20 to 30 page. And this stuff underneath, being prepared when somebody wants to learn more to provide the drill down data that you need. But the trick is, and it's hard, how do you condense all of that to a very short thing at the top that focuses what you're doing and allows you to bring people in. So think of the pyramid as we go through. So as we think about who's supposed to do this, who should develop the plan? Is it the founder? the team, if there is a team, maybe a hired writer or consultant. On next week, Charlie Tillett is going to come in and talk about financial projections. Charlie was I think he was a runner-up when it was a 10K competition. I think they got $2,500. He worked it out, it was like 80 cents an hour for the amount of work he put in. Charlie was outside this very room at an MIT Enterprise Forum presentation. If you don't know MIT Enterprise Forum, it's an organization of MIT alums and others with chapters in probably around 30 places around the country and the world where they actually work on real business. And Charlie met him out in the hall, and I asked him what he was doing for the summer, and he said he was trying to think about it. He was graduating from Sloan. And I said, well, I've got these two Indian engineers that I think are onto something, but they just don't know how to put it together. Would you be interested in meeting them? And he said, sure. So we hopped in his pickup truck the next day and we drove up. There were like 8 engineers in a room in a strip mall above a delicatessen, I think, all working on networking stuff. Charlie worked with them, didn't get paid. They managed to get a couple of contracts. Charlie went on full-time. They ended up taking him public. The company today has got about $1 billion in sales and 3,000 employees all over the world. And if it hadn't been for Charlie teaming, who could understand from a business viewpoint and how to write this stuff up, they only took venture money. They couldn't get venture money until when they did, they had $60 million valuation. So they already had a whole bunch of customers. And in fact, part of that was for the founders to take money and take it out of the company and put it in their bank accounts so they could move forward faster. And then they went public after that. So, that's an example of when you bring teams together. But Charlie will be here. You can ask him the story. Real stories here. But in any event, you need to own it. So even though Charlie was helping them write it, they ended up owning it in the sense of being able to understand and explain it to people once he put the structure around. Okay, so the plan is going to be a selling document, basically. Entrepreneurs are always selling something. If you don't think you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're not selling it all the time, you better get good at some form of selling. You're selling your vision to employees, customers, investors. And the plan is one way to do it. It has to be exciting, it has to show your vision, but it's got to be defensible. These are some of the elements that would go in a full plan. We'll touch a few of them. Typical things people want to see. For the technologists, note that technology is not necessarily a section. People don't buy technology. Bob will talk a little bit about they buy technology to solve problems. So that's going to be one of the questions. Now, in terms of what should be in the plan, cover page or first pitch deck should have the name, the contact info, confidentiality, legends, that sort of thing. Be surprised how many plans I've looked at over the years where if I got interested, I couldn't figure out how to contact the people. So let me show you what the Virtual Inc. did. They had a nice front page of their actual written plan with some information and stuff. And then they decided to put on a little legend because somebody told them that if they're going to hand the plan around, they ought to make sure who knows, who has it. And there's actually an issue with a plan or document under securities laws that we'll talk about when we do the legal section about who you can hand it to and how to use it. So when the lawyers got a hold of it, that's what happened. But they're trying to help you. But anyway, there you go. You'll learn how to deal with lawyers as part of it. But it is true that if you're out there with a plan that's asking for money specifically, that says, I'm trying to raise $2 million at a valuation of X, right there, that's probably a violation of securities laws, depending on how it's done. And it could mean that any money people put in the company, they're entitled to get back from you personally. So we'll talk a little bit about that. It is an issue. You can put a plan out there talking about here's what I'm planning, here's my vision, here's the resources I need. But it's sort of presumptuous to put in it, I'm raising this at this value, because the investors are going to make that determination in a discussion with you. Okay, so a table of contents, if you have an actual plan so people can, look at it. What do you think investors read first? Okay, and what executive summary? And why would they read that first?
Overall information.
Okay, so they know what they're looking at, right? What do they look at second?
Money.
Team. Look at the money? I thought you're the investor. You're supposed to be giving the money to me. So you look at, who said team? Yeah, why team?
That's the most important thing.
Why is a team important?
After the summary, after the idea what it is.
Okay,
Because a good team is going to make something happen.
all right. And so you've probably heard that you hear a lot of investors say, I'd rather invest in an A team with a B idea than an A idea with a B team. And the reason is, it's the people that things will change, and the question is, are the people there the ones that are going to make it happen? So let's talk about the executive summary. It's the first thing they read. It's sort of like a resume for your full plan. When you do a job, you're looking for a job, you have a resume or you have something that tells you about it. The goal is to get the interview. Someone looks at it and says, oh, I want to know more about this. It's like getting the interview. And then the question is, when people are looking at it, when investors are looking at it, I think there are really three things they look for. They have three questions, and then depending on the answer to those, they have a fourth. And I'll say this over and over again after looking at people's behavior over the years. They're going to say the three W's, whys. Why this? And by the way, you should think about this when you're thinking of an idea and whether you want to spend your time, because your time is the most valuable resource there is in a venture. There's always money out there, but we all have a limited amount of time on the earth. So the question is, why this? Why is this something that's important? Why are you doing it? Why should I, if I'm investing, why should I be along? Why now? Why is this the right time to do this? And I'll talk about that in a few minutes in a couple of examples. And then, why this team? So why do I think these people will do it? And if those things all ring true, there's the fourth why, which is, why won't this work? Right? So you've got them sort of hooked if they're ready to start asking these kind of questions. Why won't it work? The three whys, how many, have people heard of Amy Smith from the Edgerton Center? Amy was a entrant in the 50K. She went on to become a MacArthur Fellow. And she had a product that was a incubator, a phase change incubator, where you could take a sample of water and put it in this incubator that could be heated by the sun or a fire or something, and then held at a constant temperature for 24 hours. So you could see things were growing in it and the water was contaminated. Her three whys, she got up, I remember her pitch, she got up and she said something like this: 1.8 billion people on the planet don't have access to clean water. The only way to test for biological contamination is to take a sample of the water and heat it and watch it for 24 hours. The only equipment out there to do that are powered by electricity. The 1.8 billion people that don't have access to clean water, most of them don't have access to electricity. I have a way to do it without electricity. Would you like to hear more? That was pretty powerful. And in fact, she had something that they packaged up and they used in quite a few places around the world. But it was that thing. Why this? This is an important problem. 1.8 billion people have this problem. It's a big problem. Why now? I've got a solution for it that fits what the actual market looks like. And then why this team? That was the next question. Like, so well, who are you? And then she explained how she had developed a number of products for, how's it called? It's appropriate engineering for developing world problems. In other words, we don't need complex systems. We need things that actually work. So it was a pretty, keep this in mind when you're doing your pitch, when you're doing your executive summary. If you can get these things through, you'll have done a lot. The executive summary, again, is like a resume, a couple of pages, it's got to be clear. It's like a resume. So the elevator pitch is sort of like to the executive summary. Here's my pitch. Oh, I'd like to see your executive summary. The executive summary is, okay, now I want to hear a lot more. Come in and talk. And think of the pyramid. So let's look at some examples of executive summaries. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And I never know if this is going to project right. So the first one is electronic components. This is a real, honest-to-goodness one. Can you read it? Okay, so it's a startup company will make a variety of electronic components. Good name for the company. Beginning with a new type of aluminum-based capacitor. Unique product coupled with excessive demand will provide us with an ample share of the capacitor market. Founders are dedicated and determined to make the venture successful and profitable. Ooh, that's relief. I didn't know that was the case. Technical expertise is provided by James F. Lynch, who's been involved in designing capacitors for 11 years. He obtained a bachelor's in science degree in electrical engineering from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Bingo, that one probably gets somebody's attention. But there's nothing in these first few paragraphs, or even the whole thing, is what is it he's going to do? Do you know what it is? Why is there excessive demand for capacitors? How big is the market? And if you read the whole thing, it actually reads like a grant proposal. Now, it's probably true that he's got something. But in a world where people have short attention spans and lots of things to do, if he had not been from MIT, I'm not sure this would have passed any filter. So how many people have flown JetBlue? Okay, did anyone ever fly People Express? Those older in the house? A few? Okay. People Express was the earlier JetBlue, and this is their actual executive summary. The eastern seaboard of the United States is ripe for entry of a new, super efficient, low-cost air carrier to provide quick, reliable intercity air transportation. Do you know what they do? Okay. Such the energy would bring to Northeast same benefits that have accrued in other parts. Chief among these are, now they're telling you, frequent jet commuter service, price is competitive, fulfillment of the congressional goals and the Deregulation Act. Important point I'll come to in a moment. Company will be able to achieve these for following reasons: aggressive, innovative management that's been tested in the field. That's like why these guys. Equipment and design and facilities designed specifically for low-cost production of air transportation. Okay. Manpower selected, trained, and motivated to be efficient and profit-oriented. Footnote, non-union. And new systems to be applied to the entire business. So I would guess most of you would understand a lot of what People's Express was. At the time, this was totally revolutionary. But you had a full idea of it compared to whatever the electronic components thing. So that clarity, the point is, you've got one chance to make a first impression. And so you want to make sure when you're out there communicating, you're very clear about what it is you're doing and get to the point very quickly. And I think these two show that up pretty well. This is the Virtual Ink executive summary. For those of you taking the course where you're going to write an executive summary or pitch deck, every year somebody takes exactly this format and fills it out. And it's fine if you do, but the point is, answer the questions, why this, why now, why this team, before you do it. Look in here at the initially requiring $320,000, just remember that number, and further investment of $2 million need to finalize the product. So on the last night, come back and see what it actually took to do this. Okay. So now let's get into the body of the plan a little bit so I can show you some of the things you need to think about. There are many components depending on what the nature is of what your plan is, because again, you're trying to answer the question, why this, why now, why this team? in one case, it's like, what's the market opportunity? How big is this? You know, what is it now? How fast is it growing? Why is this the right time for what you're doing? The convergence of opportunity and solution. We had an entrance in the business plan competition who had, back then we didn't know who the people were. Hang on here. Did I roll to a different slide? Sorry. Go back. And they came up and said, how come we didn't make the semifinals? And what their plan was they had a new technology that would allow better air traffic control in the United States. I mean, they had all sorts of things of how they could do this, that, and the other thing. And the judges thought that was fascinating, but, you know, how are you going to do that? And we said, well, it sounded fascinating, but it didn't seem like it was going to be realistic. You've got to change the whole air traffic control system in the United States. And they said, well, didn't you know that the FAA had put out a request for proposal for that? No, you didn't tell us that. That would have made a difference, right? Convergence, they had a solution at the right time that it could have been viable. That silly thing like that, for many people would have said, oh, great, a bunch of techies, you know, probably a great thing, but really you're going to change the whole air traffic control system. So convergence of opportunity and solution. Timing can be just about anything. A real example there. Now, what about the market? You need to understand a number of these questions. Who's in the market? What are the segments? What are the competitive advantage? Who are the current players? So picture yourself, you're the founders of Airbnb, and I don't know if you heard the story of how they went to some convention or something, and there was no hotels, and they ended up camping on someone's floor, and they thought, well, you know, maybe this could work, we could rent other rooms out. So you're there saying, I've got a problem. And if you're going to try to convince someone to put money in a company to do what? So what's the market look like? Who's in the market? You got hotels, maybe some bed and breakfasts. There were those things back then. Or, you know, staying at a friend's house. You know, how would they present what the opportunity was? I don't have a copy of their plan, but that's the kind of thing people are going to say, well, that's a good idea, but it's sort of how do you get there? And then the question you'll also see is who loses if you win, and what's their response going to be? Have you anticipated that? Something I've heard a number of venture capitalists say over the years. And you ought to be thinking about it. Now, in the case of, say, Uber, you know, if they win, the taxi people lose, and they're the incumbents with some political power, presumably, and you're starting to see now regulation of ride sharing and the like. What they were able to do is to get out there fast enough and ahead of that curve before people woke up, and you know, maybe that's how they end up winning. Or they may, at one point, there was discussion that maybe Uber would actually provide services to taxis, you know, to let the taxis be the regulated ones. They just make money on services. What's the go-to-market strategy? How are you going to get out there? You know, who's going to be your first customer? And Bob's going to talk a lot tonight about this point. And the classic, you know, in every industry you get all these different expressions. Will the dog eat the dog food? Great idea, guys, but how do you know the dogs are going to eat the dog food you have? And that's really about, you know, do you have a customer that will actually want what you're there? The whole lean startup, people have heard of lean startup? I'll chat a little bit about it during business models. It was a way of validated learning to try to answer these questions before you launch a company. You know, get the feedback so you don't go and build the wrong product. Whoops. Whoops. What's going on? All right. Okay, and then if you've got any real development, people are going to want to know, well, where are you in the development process? Is this just an idea? Is this a rough prototype? You know, how far along? What are you going to need for that? and be honest about where you are in the process. When you're thinking about doing a product, what I really encourage you to do is try not to do a product that's like nuclear fusion. And what do I mean by that? They've been working on nuclear fusion for 50, 60, 75 years. And the problem is until everything works, none of it works. And that's deadly for an entrepreneur because if you've got to make the whole system work, you're going to run out of time and money. So think about, and we'll talk during business models, think about what you're doing and seeing if there's a slice of it that you can actually get done. One of the problems that entrepreneurs tackle, especially in technology areas, is they sort of get stuck in development between rounds of financing if they're outside financed. That's the worst thing in the world. You've got everything going, you don't meet your deadlines. You can probably get away with that once, but if it's extended, now you've got investors who are getting disappointed. H equals R divided by E, and reality is going down, and their expectations are high, so their happiness is going down. And you can get stuck between rounds of financing and go out of business, or get severely diluted in your ownership. And Yana will talk a little bit about that on his night. These are the action plans. How are you going to actually do this? One of the things that I like to look for is credibility testers. All right, I hear what you're doing, but what is it that I don't believe? Engineers have to think about the whole problem, right? We have to solve the whole thing. Investors are looking for things where they can be de-risked. How can I reduce the risk of this investment? And those are credibility testers. So let's say you were going to build, you had a proposal to build the Golden Gate Bridge. It's going to cost a fortune. But to get people along, you might want to think, well, what are people concerned about? Well, are they concerned there's no bedrock or that it's going to be too deep? Maybe I would do something that would show that it can be done at that level. Or maybe there's a question of whether the access roads can get permitted. I looked at, people familiar with Zipcar? I looked at Zipcar, one of the first plans they did. And I love the concept of shared things like that. But to think that they were going to be able to get parking spaces in Cambridge. The joke around MIT is you're recruiting a faculty member and you can say, I can offer you tenure, the Nobel Prize, or parking. And parking usually wins the day. So the point is, how do you, all the moving parts that they had to deal with to get municipalities to give up meter space, and all of this stuff, it was just like so many things out of their control. And it turned out it took them a long time. Now, I'm glad they did it, but from in both an investor and an entrepreneur viewpoint, they really didn't get much financial return, even though they ended up, I think, going public or close to public, because there were so many things going on. But that's fine if that's what you want to do. Just remember you have to take that into account. Appendices. If you have a plan, you might want to have these listed. In any event, you might want to have this information, again, depending on what you're doing. If it's a technical area and you have some patents, you should have some descriptions of that you pull out when you get into what's called due diligence. Due diligence is what investors do and other people will do to see, is this real? Oh, I think it's a great idea. I'm going to have my technical person look at your patents or whatever. Now, what about fine-tuning and targeting what you do? Should you have it reviewed by others? I generally think yes. When I write, after I've revised it 2 or 3 times, it's almost like object-oriented programming. I read it and say, oh, that's the customer segment. And, I can't critically do it. So as you write it, try it out on people. If you've got people that should know enough about it or are smart enough and they can't figure it out, then you need to rewrite it. I said, look at whether you can get an accountant for finance. The finance part, if you have a real financial projections, you definitely want to have a look at that. And if you're thinking of raising money, at some point you should have the lawyer look at that. And we'll talk a little bit about how to deal with lawyers. This is something from Lita Nelson when she was head of the technology licensing office about, how do people look at plans as a financing three different reads. First one is a resume. I've talked about that. The second is to look at it and say, do I really think this will work? And the third is committing to a plan. And so the point is, if you don't make the first cut, if your resume isn't good, if the pitch isn't good, you're never going to get to the others. So what are the ways you make a first cut? Well, an idea too good to ignore, financial promise that's too good to turn down, a team that's good enough to believe in, action plans, details that give assurances. There's passion, but there's sanity. In other words, this really looks like these people have thought about what they're doing, and it's why this, why now, why this team. Here's some reasons I've seen people fail to make the first cut. Insignificant market. I'm raising $5 million to go after a market that got 25 million. I actually saw that. I mean, to raise $5 million where the whole market is 25 million is probably not worth the time and effort. Non-credible technology, usually not an issue at MIT, except to the extent that you're way too far ahead of the curve. I was at a private wealth management conference a couple of years, three years ago, and someone came up and said, oh, you do stuff at MIT, yeah. Well, tell me about this 3D printing, this new 3D printing. And I said, well, I got to tell you, the original patents on those expired. What? Yeah, the only thing that's happening now is, when I talk about convergence of opportunity and solution, is there's been advances in material sciences and sensors and other things that have made it actually viable for a bigger range of products. But it's not new. It's been around for a long time. And there were some early companies that got founded on 3D printing, but they never really quite got really big. And now the second cycle of technology. So that's the only caution I would have for MIT people, because we're used to seeing things that are probably way ahead of where they need to be for way behind for commercialization. Failure to understand the market. I put a asterisk there, or culture. An interesting entrant in the 100K competition a few years ago was a method for storing and distributing vaccines. Vaccines usually have to be refrigerated in a liquid form. Makes it difficult to deliver in the developing world where there may not be electricity. And so they came up with a dry technique, powder type thing, and a very simple machine that could atomize it and deliver it. And it could be done without refrigeration. Sounds like a pretty good promise. What do you think happened when they took it into the field? Nobody wanted to use it. Can you think of why? No, it's a culture issue. It was startling when they got out and tested it, and why you have to go talk to people who you think you're going to provide it to. I think it was in India. I'll pick on India for this one. The mothers who formerly took their babies to be vaccinated only saw it being done with a needle. And if the baby didn't get stuck with a needle and didn't cry, they didn't think it worked. They didn't believe it worked. They worked at it, so they didn't know what it was. And it turned out nobody wanted it. It was sort of this strange thing. So it wasn't either communicated well, or it really was a different cultural model. So an elegant solution that could have worked in a bunch of things, but for the target market, it didn't work at all. I mean, that was sort of mind-blowing. Who would have thought that the whole purpose was you didn't have to take needles, sterilize them, inject pain in the process, was actually a positive perception on the part of the customer or the user, and not a negative one. So really understanding, and every time I think I understand a market, before I get in there and actually get into there, I learned long ago not to do that, because I always find something that with a little research and talking to the actual people I could have avoided. And some more things that they fail. These are more, operational things. I once saw a plan where it was clear that the product needed FDA, Food and Drug Administration approval, and there was no mention of that anywhere in the plan or in the pitch. And it wasn't even clear that they understood that it needed FDA approval. So the credibility fell like that. Cosmetic things, again, one chance to make a first impression. You know, I was back in the days, one part of my history is I was actually a practicing lawyer for a number of years. And when I was a young associate, I handed something in and I got a call from the senior partner who said, I hope you didn't send that out. No, I sent it for you. You wanted a draft. He said, you spelled the client's name wrong. Don't ever do that again. They don't know whether we're providing them good service or bad service, but they figure if you don't get their name right, how could they be paying it? You could be paying attention to anything else. And so I think the same thing here is if you don't have something that looks professional, that looks like you really are a team that can execute on it, you lose credibility again. So make sure whatever you're presenting is the image that you want to have presented. It's a minor point, but I've seen people fail because of that. So in summary, what have we covered? I've talked about why develop a venture plan, you know, some of the things that should be in it, and some of those things that I've talked about we're going to amplify on other nights in more detail. And then the plan is a financing document. And remember the pyramid? Again, underneath a lot of things you've thought about, the ability to distill that down, not only for talking to investors, but talking to anyone about what you're doing. If you can't get it to them in a short period of time so they understand it, it doesn't work. And we're in a world of Twitter where attention spans are going down faster than you can count. You've got to be even faster on your feet for this stuff. So we're going to do a break for about probably 15 minutes or so. What I'd like you to do during the break, because we're trying to do some team building, is go and sit with somebody else for the second part that you don't know and start a conversation about why you're here, you know, what are you doing, and we'll see if we can start to build some teams. We know you gave us some ideas of people in areas where they're looking to join things, and we're working on a way of trying to link you up a little more formally. But we'll come back here at about 7:35, and we'll talk about the logistics of the course, and then Bob's going to do a great presentation on customers.